Well, as the votes are being counted and Afghans await the results, there are still many challenges the leader will face. As Sean mentioned, some of those challenges. For more on the importance of these elections, we're joined live in the studio by Scott Smith. He's the director for Afghanistan and Central Asia at the United States Institute for Peace. Thank you for joining us, Scott. So how big of a test is this election for the country, for the Afghan people?
It's a huge test. I think it's a test of a lot of the effort that's made in the last 13 years to build these institutions. It's a test of the Afghan Electoral Commission, which for the first time is really leading this on its own. It's a test for the candidates who all are running for the first time and ran an engaging, a spirited, but not a mean-spirited campaign. And above all, the final test was the one that we saw today and that your report mentioned, which is, would the Afghans come out to vote? And they did. And so I think from the indications we've had so far, it's safe to say that this was not only an important test, maybe one of the most important events in the last 13 years, but one that so far it seems that they've passed quite successfully.
So how do you make sure this process is fair and free? There has been a lot of allegations of corruption and fraud, as Sean mentioned. So how do you regain the public trust in this system?
For me, that was one of the key reasons why we needed to see a high turnout. The more voters that are there lining up, as you saw, casting their votes legitimately, the harder it is to change the result with fraudulent votes. And I think that the high turnout means that we won't have the same kind of problem that we had in 2009. The other crucial test is, are the amount of fraudulent votes enough to change the result? Mm-hmm. And that did happen in 2009. It will be much harder for that to happen this time. I think the fraud will be more evenly distributed. And again, the fact of the high turnout will probably make it a much less important feature, even though, as you said, I'm sure there are incidents of fraud and corruption.
So do you think this will be a tight race among the three top contenders? And what happens if there's no clear majority?
Yeah. The only thing we really have to go on to figure out whether it's a tight race or not are the three polls that have been held so far since October. And they've been fairly consistent. They've showed two candidates, Ashraf Ghani and Abdullah, leading between 25 and 30%, and a third candidate, Zalmay Rasool, at around 8 to 10%. Mm-hmm. But polls are notoriously unreliable in Afghanistan, so who knows? My feeling is I don't really want to speculate. I think that, as I said, everybody's done their job. The candidates have campaigned responsibly. The voters have voted. The institutions have worked. And for those observers like me in the international community, I think we owe them the patience to allow the votes to be counted, and then we'll see what the result is.
What about the threat of violence from the Taliban? That, you know, the group is such a force to reckon with in this country, and they're still there after the war. And so how do you deal with the Taliban? Do you negotiate with them? Do you bring them in? Do you isolate them? I mean, they certainly...
In 2 weeks, as we saw, with the numerous attacks in Kabul, including 2 against the Election Commission itself. But again, the turnout here matters because every vote that was cast, for whatever candidate was cast, was a vote cast for the system. And in that sense, it was also a vote cast against the Taliban, which is why I think they wanted this election to fail. But despite the threats, despite the bad weather, also very strong. There'll be a negotiation. That have always been efforts. I think it's a bit more likely because I was not really wanting to negotiate to do it different, especially if he's one who would have the legitimacy of the people based on an event today.
Seats and ask you think the biggest issue is for today. Mm-hmm. What would they say?
Security, I think. Security, but there are a few things wrapped up with security, which include corruption, include the difficult economic situation, and the relationship with the international community, because Afghanistan still needs donor money to fund its own security forces. So all of those issues are kind of wrapped up together, but those I think are what's probably on the top of voters' minds as they went to the polls.
And do you think that's also the top priority for whoever wins this election? Is it security or is it economy?
I think with the international community that has become, in the last President Karzai, of course, associated between the U.S. and the Afghan government, but which President Karzai has not signed, will probably also be high on the agenda of the next president.
All right. Thank you so much, Scott Smith, Director for Afghanistan and Central Asia at the United States Institute for Peace. We appreciate your perspective.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
Thank you very much.